Today.
Okay, so today we're on our last day of teachings on mind training on the text that is called The Will of Sharp Weapons. So all of you students here, you have done quite a few study of similar texts on lojong and on lamrim, and also the plan is that you will continue to study these subjects. So there is one issue, or there is one information that is quite important when we talk about the lojong, the mind training, and that is the use of the 5 powers. The use of the 5 powers is something that we find reference to in the relevant sections in Lama Chöpa. Maybe you're not aware of it because usually we recite Lama Chöpa in Tibetan, but the thing is that it is the very essence, those 5 powers are the very essence, the core meaning of mind training. And you could say that you can employ those 5 powers during all the practices that you do in the duration of your life, or you could say that in the duration of a day, from morning till evening, the various activities that you do that become practices of mind training actually incorporate those 5 powers. So Rinpoche today would like to talk about the 5 powers. They are greatly beneficial today, but also in the future, when you do other mind training study, you will see how useful it is. So keep track of those 5 as we will go through the list. And Rinpoche says my objective today, really, in terms of the class, is to present this, and after this, we can conclude the class. All right, so let's enumerate those 5 powers. The first one is the power of intention. The power of intention is really setting up your motivation. So when you wake up in the morning and you say, today I will do this and this. So this is like setting up the path of activities in front of you. The second one is the power of familiarity. So we all talk about meditating or developing familiarity or developing familiarity with new paths, new ways of thinking, and so forth. The third one is the power of the white seed. So white here refers to virtue. So the white seed, the power of the white seed refers to amassing the accumulation and engaging in activities of purification. The fourth one is the power of repudiation. So what we repudiate here, or what we put the blame upon, is everything that goes against mind training. So all the afflictions, all the self-grasping, and all the self-cherishing. So we put the blame, or we see the fault that lies within them. And the last one is the power of the prayer. So with the power of the prayer, we indicate that whatever virtue we create during the course of the day, at the end of the day, we dedicate this so that we can generate bodhicitta and we can increase whatever bodhicitta we have generated. So these are, again, the 5 powers: the power of intention, the power of familiarity, the power of the white seed, the power of repudiation, and the power of prayer. We start with the first one, which is the power of intention. So as we say, the intention is something that usually we set at the beginning of the day, or it is very good to set it at the beginning of the day. Whether we're talking in terms of Dharma practice or whether we talk about ordinary mundane activities, this is something which is very important, because actually this sets the frame of your mind. And depending on the frame of your mind, you will find that the course of the day, the activities that you will carry in the course of the day might seem endless, very difficult, or they might seem to be very easy and enjoyable. So to give you an example, even for a simple, ordinary task, if you develop this enthusiasm for the task, for the job, if you, in your mind, you develop this attitude that says, oh, I'd like to do this, I'm excited that I get the opportunity to do this, when you carry out this activity, the job will appear to be small. It will appear to be easy. It will almost be like a play, and you will just plow through. You will just slide through it without any difficulty. If you have the different attitude, I dislike doing this, but I have to do this today. Even if it is a short job, even if it is a small task, it will seem to you like an endless, heavy, it's like you have to climb a whole mountain. So you can see that setting up your mind with the right attitude at the beginning of the day, it is very important. It's very important also from a different perspective. Yesterday and the day before and so forth, whatever happened or didn't happen, those things are gone. Tomorrow and the day after and the month after, these are again things that are in the future. Perhaps you have some hopes, but it's not in your hand. So what do we really have? What we have is right now the present. The present is something that is totally within our grasp. So if we decide and we say, this day, today, that I have within my hands, I will make sure I will not waste it, all right? So I will make this day meaningful. So let's say that you are a practitioner of mind training. How do I make this day, today, meaningful? I make it meaningful because I will resist self-cherishing. I will not allow myself, just for this one day, today, to fall under the power of self-cherishing. And I will try to meditate and develop the mind of bodhicitta as much as I can. All right. So even if you are not such a dedicated, let's say, mind training practitioner, at least you could have the idea and say, I will make this day meaningful by engaging in virtue as much as possible. I will try to make my thoughts as noble as possible, right? And if I can do it well today, if today goes well, there is every reason to hope and to believe that tomorrow and the day after that, things will also go well. All right. So the key here is to set the best intention, the best motivation, the best attitude just for today. But if you keep doing this every day, day after day, this is how the whole life is spent, every day being a good day. Okay, we continue with the second one of those powers, that is the power of familiarity. So familiarity here is definitely developing familiarity through our study, through our meditation on subjects of lojong, on how to develop bodhicitta, and on the Lam Rim. Okay, in particular, we talk here about developing familiarity with lojong, mind training. We know that there are two main systems. From those two main systems for training in bodhicitta, the main one here we are discussing is the system of equalizing and exchanging self for others. But we know that we also have the second system, which is the sevenfold cause and effect method. Both of those methods are methods that lead us to generate the love of attraction. Once you generate the love of attraction, then naturally that will lead you to generating compassion, special intention, and from that point onwards, you will generate bodhicitta. Okay, so what is so crucial and so important about this love of attraction? Okay, currently, to be really honest, when we examine our mind, we'll see that we have very different attitudes towards different groups of people. There is a group of people that we consider to be my people. So these are people that we really like. It could be your friends, it could be some members of your family, and so forth. Then there are other people that we strongly dislike. There are people that we categorize as enemies, right? And finally, there is the third group of people that are strangers. And the majority of people really fall in this category of strangers. They're strangers and we don't care very much about them. We're not really preoccupied with what is happening to them. When it comes to our friends, we have a very strong reaction to them, to whatever they experience. So even if they experience a very small amount of suffering and a very small trouble, immediately we are concerned, immediately we wish them to be free of this suffering. We want them to have happiness. Even we feel that we are personally responsible and that we should do whatever it takes to smooth out the situation and remove whatever discomfort is there. When it comes to the second category, which is our enemies, certainly we do not have thoughts like this, right? If we observe something bad happening to them, we never think it's my responsibility to smooth things out. Actually, we might go even to the other extreme of rejoicing and say, oh, things didn't work out for them, didn't it? You know, that serves them right. And when it comes to the strangers, we are just indifferent, right? We don't care enough to be involved. We don't wish them any happiness. We don't wish them any harm. We just stay in a distance. Okay. So why is it that there is such a big difference in our attitude? For the friends, naturally, there is this concern. For the enemy, naturally, there is this animosity. For the strangers, naturally, there is this indifference, right? We don't have any special connection. So the whole point of generating the love of attraction is that we normalize and we don't have these differences. And that means that we have equal concern for everybody. So this is what comes with the love of attraction. All right. So then we will have compassion, equal compassion for all of them. So we talk a lot about how important it is to generate this mind, which is the love of attraction. The question is why we don't have it. Why do we have to try so hard in order to generate it? We don't have it because, as we say, we have self-cherishing. And when you have self-cherishing, you actually consider yourself to be the most important person. If you consider yourself to be the most important person, you are going to be very happy or very flattered when someone is helping you, right? So you will consider that person as your friend. So immediately you will have that affinity towards that person. But if somebody does not, let's say, talk to you in a respectful manner or does not help you and so forth, immediately you will become very upset because you would say, why are they speaking to me in this way? Why are they behaving to me, towards me in this manner? Right? This is unacceptable. And then you will consider that person naturally to be your enemy. The thing is that a young child initially does not have enemies, does not have the concept of close friends or enemies. But as we grow up in society, gradually this idea of, oh, this person or this group really benefits me, or this person or this group of people, they really harm me, they're out there to get me, they sabotage me, and so forth. We develop these attitudes, and by doing this, obviously, we categorize people in these groups, the friends, the enemies, the strangers. So definitely it is something that is acquired later on in life. Therefore, the important thing is to try to reduce our self-cherishing as much as possible, right? So remember that verse from Bodhisattva's Ways of Life. It says, what need is there to say more? See the difference between our teacher, the Bhagavan, and ourselves who are left behind. Therefore, please bless me to be able to to equalize and exchange self for others. So our teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, achieved the state of Buddhahood by exchanging this attitude of cherishing oneself with the attitude of cherishing others. We have not done this, and therefore, due to our very strong self-cherishing, we are left behind. This is why there is all this difference. Okay, so as we say, it's quite important to engage in the study of lojong. Obviously, sometimes we can do this. We need to develop familiarity, and the way that we do this is by attending teachings, all right? But don't think that this is the only way you can do it with your physical presence in front of the teacher. Sometimes you can become familiar with lojong if you just participate in a conversation, in a dialogue, right? Or at times, you can read books. These days, we have so many books on Lamrim, on lojong, mind training. In this, all of this area is so well represented in our publications, and there are so many books from His Holiness the Dalai Lama that we can so easily obtain. And in addition to that, these days, with the internet, with Zoom and so forth, there are so many teachings online, right? So no one can say that you don't have access to this material. If you want to develop familiarity with this material, everything is out there available. Of course, we all have to work. We all have very busy schedules. But just think that even if I dedicate just 1 minute a day, right, or just a few minutes every week, now this minute accumulates. I spend a minute on lojong today, another minute tomorrow, again and again. So I gather new information. I develop familiarity with this. Definitely, I will hear some new information through all those teachings, right? And that will help me a lot with my inspiration on these subjects. So definitely, this is something we can do to develop familiarity. Also, another thing is that you should, at times you can derive familiarity by looking back at the notes that you keep during the teachings. Now, Rinpoche is saying, I think that although we have all these means that facilitate study, there is one area that perhaps is causing a little bit of a problem. And that thing is that you're listening to the teachings as it is tonight, for example, through a Lama who speaks to you in a language that you don't understand. So you have to go through a translation. And in this particular case, we have the original teachings given in Tibetan. You have a translation in English. But from yourself, perhaps English is not your first language. It's not even my first language. And, you come from a Singaporean, Asian background. Okay, so just to unpack this, what we mean with this is that the Tibetan language is a language that from the very beginning was developed for the purpose of Dharma. And therefore, it's a language that includes a lot of concept, of meaning, of vocabulary that is Dharma meaning, Dharma vocabulary. It has to do with views, philosophical views, how to express them, how to be very clear with them, and so forth. So they are very specific, let's say, Lamrim terminology, lojong terminology, and so on and so forth. Now, when you hear the teachings translated from Tibetan into English, let's say, okay, so you have to go through the medium of the translation. The English language does not have the same richness of terminology that the Tibetan language has. And no matter how faithful the translation is, you are not directly perceiving the words in a language in the language of the teacher. So it is very difficult to have 100% accurate transmission of the meaning that the teacher is explaining. So there is a difference between what the teacher says and what reaches your ears. And even if it is the most perfect, accurate translation, the fact that you have a different cultural background and that in your society you have different customs, right? And different ideas of how to do things, then all this creates can create a bit of distance or a little bit of misunderstanding. So to overcome this, make sure that you look at many different books. Don't just read one book, read different books. And every time you have doubt, you have a question, take that question and ask it to the teacher and try to clarify the point as much as possible. The other thing is that some of you occasionally might be thinking that, oh, I don't practice enough. I only sometimes, I don't know much. I cannot practice much. So it is some sort of like the mind becomes depressed when you think that. But Rinpoche says you should not be thinking this, all right? So I will explain this through an example. It's not necessary that we have the full range of things in the best quality in order to function. So let's say that you have a person who is living in an apartment, okay? They might not have every item of clothes imaginable according to fashion and season and so forth. They might not have every pot and pan at every size and every shape. They might not have every type of furniture that you could possibly put in an apartment. But if they have the basics, the fundamentals, then that person can dress themselves, can cook, and can live quite comfortably, all right? We're not, of course, from house to house, they will be different because some people will have more items than others, and some people will have better quality. Some people will have, they have a set of cooking pots, but it will be let's say, lesser quality. But nevertheless, you can cook, you can have you can make food in that, right? So Rinpoche is saying is not the case of, let's look here at clothes, right? So it's not the case that you have a person who has, 50 sets of trousers and only 2 t-shirts, right? If that is the case, obviously there is an imbalance and that person is not capable of dressing enough to go out. But if you have a person that has, let's say, 2 or 3 pairs of trousers and 2 or 3, tops, then that is enough for the person to dress and change the clothes and come in and go out, isn't it? Okay. In terms of making food, if you have the basic ingredients, you can make a decent meal for today. It might not be, Master Chef, elaborate meal. It might not be the most delicious meal. However, you can cook with the basics. You can cook a meal and you can have it. So this is what happens here. This is what we say here with the time that we have to study and practice the Dharma. So even if you only have one verse, there will be opportunity that you can apply the meaning of that verse and practice Dharma in this way. So do not become depressed thinking, I don't have all the time in the world. I have not read enough. I cannot practice enough. If you start putting yourself down, you paralyze, then you cannot do anything. So to give you an example, let's say that you leave your home and you go out, and when you're in the street, someone says something really bad and insulting to you. Now, we have an option here. Obviously, you heard those words. They are insulting words, but you might decide to say, okay, I'm going to put it out of my mind and forget about it. If you don't engage this situation, you will forget about it and you go along with your day. However, we have the tendency to do the opposite. We don't let go of this. We do not want to forget it. Actually, we want to indulge. We want to think more and more about it. And the more we think about it, the more we increase and make the situation worse. Because then we start speculating. It's as if we start making a whole scenario. It's like, why did they say this? They really dislike me. They hate me. They're jealous of me. This is such a bad person. Okay, so now we start having secondary thoughts. Not only we're not forgetting, but we are increasing. And with each one of those thoughts, negative thoughts that we're having, we are supporting it with some sort of logic or argument that we have made up. All of this is made up. It's elaboration, right? But the more we indulge in this, the more we think, the more we contemplate it, we go over the arguments again and again, what we do is that we increase and increase and increase. And what we increase is anger. So we come to the point of becoming very angry. Our facial expression is distorted. Our speech becomes very negative. And then once we start behaving in this way, like the amount of anger around us, all around us, increases, isn't it? So the situation becomes worse. The idea here, when we say that we want to meditate or we want to develop familiarity with lojong and with lam rim, you have to understand that it is not the type of meditation that you have to do by sitting formally in the full lotus posture, in a very quiet, peaceful place where you do not interact with any nasty people who might say anything bad to you. This is not how the practice is done. Right? Or even these days, many people think that meditation is like you must employ some technique where you stop all feelings, all thoughts, nothing arises in the mind, and so forth. Okay, this is not it. So when you meditate on lojong, when you meditate on lam rim, really what we refer to is the way that you think, the way that you analyze. And basically, the way that we think and we analyze is the same way that we think and we analyze when we engage anger. It's only that we don't go into the negative, we go into a more positive direction. So, for example, you could be walking down the street and you see someone who is obviously underprivileged, maybe someone who is homeless, who is in the streets, is not in a very good situation. So, or maybe you see a dog, or maybe you see a cat. And the thing is that you have to engage this situation. You say, okay, I saw this person or I saw this animal, what sort of suffering, they are exposed to the elements, they are hungry, they are not well dressed, they are sick, they do not have a refuge, they are not protected, they have this problem, they have that problem. So the more you analyze, the more you think down that track, the more that helps you generate compassion. So this meditation on lojong and on lam rim is something that you can carry out whilst you're walking down the street, whilst you are engaging your work in the office, or whilst you carry out any other activities. All right. So remember the first thing that we said, that we tend to categorize, and we have the friends, we have the enemies, we have the strangers, and we have very different attitudes for these three groups of people. So the whole point of meditating or developing familiarity with lojong and lam rim is so that we don't have this big difference when we interact with different people. And another thing that we can do is that actually a part of mind training is to use a verse that, or just a line or a verse that you find that has a good effect, benefits your mind, and just appropriate this and use it in various occasions. There are so many verses that perhaps we could pick here. We were reading for 3 days from the Will of Sharp Weapons. There are many good verses here, or many verses from Bodhisattva's Ways of Life. Or another verse that Rinpoche was saying, which is advice, how to think, like, when I am happy, may I just wish that everybody else also experience happiness. And when I am suffering, may I think that this reduces the ocean of suffering of everybody else. You don't need to go to a teacher and ask for a verse. You don't need to ask somebody else to indicate a verse to you. You might be reading a text and, like as we say, Bodhisattva's Ways of Life or a lojong text, and the verse has an impression, makes an impression on you. And you find that it benefits your mind. So if that is the case, just grab this verse and memorize it, and use it as often as you have. You don't have necessarily to recite it. You don't necessarily have to write it down or do anything like this. Just use it in your mind. And not only this, sometimes we hear, let's say, a proverb or a saying, perhaps it's not even related to Dharma. It could be, like a proverb in society, and it could be useful. Or you might hear something from another religion, right? Because different religions have different sayings, and some of them are quite useful. If you find something useful, if you find a verse that is useful, appropriate it, grab it, and start using it all the time, all right? So, for example, the verse that Rinpoche was talking about, when you experience happiness, don't just sit there and indulge in the feeling of happiness. I am so lucky, I'm happy, but just say, just as I experience happiness, may everybody else come to experience happiness. And when you experience some suffering, do not sit there and cultivate this attitude that says, oh, I am the only person who has this type of suffering. No one suffers the way I do. Just don't think like this. Just think that just as I suffer, many other sentient beings are suffering. And may my suffering become the cause to remove the suffering of others. Whether saying this or thinking this has an actual effect on reducing the suffering of others, this is irrelevant. What is the most important thing is the effect that it has on your mind, because it reinforces your mind, right? It takes you away from that miserable situation where you start thinking that you are the only person who experiences this suffering. Because once you start thinking this way, you have the original suffering, and then you have the way of thinking, which creates additional anxiety and suffering. So at least you can avoid that. Another verse that Rinpoche would like to mention is just a few words, but very great meaning and very beneficial. So it's a verse that says, when with others, always examine your speech. When alone, always examine your body. And in all cases, always examine your mind. So you see, when you're in the company of others, of course, what do we do in the company of others? We engage in conversation. We talk with others. So it is the most important thing when we are with others is to always examine our speech. So don't say something that will insult others, that will upset others, or that will create obstacles also for yourself, right? So when with others, always examine your speech. When alone, examine your body. When alone, examine your body indicates that you have to be aware of your physical activities. Often when we are in the presence of other people, due to a sense of shame, we restrain ourselves from certain activities. But when we are alone, we might engage in different type of behavior. So therefore it says, when alone, make sure your physical conduct is proper. And in any case, always examine your mind. So you see, it's a very short verse, but if you can hold the meaning of that verse, you will see that you can practice it and you can apply it, you can recite it to yourself, and it will be very helpful in so many occasions. Anyway, Rinpoche was saying it has given you all sorts of advice. It might seem to be a little bit disconnected, but it comes under this section of the power of familiarity. The power of familiarity has to do with developing familiarity with good attitude. But to develop this is not something that you can develop it like without any effort. It doesn't come naturally. You must have a plan. You must study. You must, have a particular order of developing some new good habits, isn't it? So Rinpoche has mentioned at the beginning that it is important to go and listen to the teachings. It is important to read. It is important to participate in discussions and conversations. And it's very important to ask questions to the teacher. So here we mentioned the difficulty that sometimes comes with translation, right? Especially if you have to read something in another language, whether it is translated, let's say, from Tibetan to English, from English to Chinese, or from Tibetan to Chinese, and so forth. Keep in mind that we have different terminology. And also we have a different use of the terms in different societies. So you might be reading a particular word or a phrase, and you don't necessarily get the intended meaning. So always analyze. If you have a doubt, always go there and ask the question until you are sure you have really understood the meaning of these translated words as accurate as possible. And the next point that we mention here is that never lose your courage, never be discouraged and think, I have not studied enough, or I cannot practice enough, and so forth. Because once you do this, you really undermine yourself. So just as we said right before here, just one verse. When in the presence of others, always examine your speech. When alone, always examine your body. And at all times, always examine your mind. One verse, just a few words, it can be extremely beneficial. It can be applied in so many ways. So we mentioned about studying lojong, and we said look at different texts, but we have to say that from the various lojong texts, the best, which is the classic, is Bodhisattva's Ways of Life. Up to this day, there has not been composed a text that surpasses these texts, and it's very doubtful that in the future there will be another text that will be better than Bodhisattva's Ways of Life. Also with other texts, contemporary text or very old or other texts, they might lose their meaning or their importance according to the time or the society and so forth. But Bodhisattva's Ways of Life is a classic, and what we mean by classic is something that does not lose its value, is an exceptional text. It's recommended that really you read that text, you rely upon these texts. So talking about developing the power of familiarity, it can strictly refer to developing the power of familiarity in terms of training in lojong to generate bodhicitta, but it has a more general meaning of developing familiarity with good habits, good new paths, of virtue and so forth. Okay, so remember, the past is gone. The future is something that has not come yet, but what is right now in our hands is today, the present day. And if I can do the best I can today, then I can continue in this pattern for another day and another day. Okay, so as you can see here from, we have spent quite a lot of time talking about the power of familiarity. The reason is that from the 5 powers, the one that requires the most work is the power of familiarity. The first one, that was the power of intention, is just a thought. You wake up in the morning and you say, okay, I will do the best I can today. That doesn't take long. The second one, which is the power of familiarity, is the one that requires a lot of effort, a lot of work that goes into it. And that's why our explanation was so long. The one that comes after that is the power of the white seed. The power of the white seed is actually supporting the power of familiarity. The power of the white seed, which is number 3, actually has 2 branches. One is amassing accumulation, and the other one is working on your purification. So as we say, the power of the white seed has to do with amassing the accumulation and purify the negativity. So the way that we amass accumulation really depends on the way that we are thinking. So it's a motivation. You could be carrying out any activity, but depending on your motivation, this can become accumulation of virtue, or it might just remain an ordinary activity. So to give you an example, right now at the center, you have a lot of lights, right? So someone might think, let's have the lights on, because when you have the lights on, it's not dark and it's very nice to have everything bright. Okay, so obviously when you turn the lights on, and we have the benefit of electricity. However, that's not necessarily a virtuous activity. That does not accumulate merit. If, on the other hand, you turn the lights on and you say, I'm making a light offering, this is an offering, then your way of thinking transforms the exact same activity into accumulation of virtue, accumulation of merit, okay? So the same thing, for example, any type of job that you do, if you do it with the right motivation and intention to help someone, it becomes accumulation of virtue. So you walk down the street and someone is asking you directions, which way should I go to reach this destination? If you answer in a nice way with the intention to help them and guide that person, it becomes accumulation of virtue. So when we talk about build up your accumulation and purify your negativity, don't think that it really requires some extraneous and extraordinary activities, and it only refers to things such as prostrations and things like that, right? It doesn't work in this way. It's just any activity done with the right motivation. And since we're talking about this, so all the pujas that we do fall in this category. The reason why we do the pujas is to accumulate some merit and to purify negativity. And if we are successful in doing this, then the obstacles will be removed. It is important to understand that in Buddhism, we don't have this idea of a God creator. However, if you approach the pujas with a very narrow-minded idea, and you think, okay, if I do medicine Buddha puja, it will automatically remove all my illness. Then if you're thinking this way, you're actually have this idea of the God creator, all right, who can give me the illness, and if I do this, he will take away the illness. It's not like this. The pujas and the prayers and the practices we do are to build up our merit and to purify our negativity. If you do that, then the obstacles will remove. So definitely we mentioned here different practices such as prostrations, offerings, maybe doing practices for establishing wealth, such as Zambala, or the practice of medicine Buddha, practice for the long life and establishing long life and so forth. So Rinpoche is saying, I'm not saying that all these practices are not beneficial. Definitely there is benefit. If you do long life practices, if you do medicine Buddha, there is benefit in the health, in the long life of a person who is sick and so forth. But what I want to say is that we need to understand how those things work. We should not approach them with the attitude that, of the God creator. And if I do these practices, the God creator would like me. And if he likes me, he will take away the suffering. It doesn't work like this. It all goes back to an understanding of the law of cause and effect. So there are various, let's say, Buddhas or Bodhisattvas who, through the power of their compassion or the power of their prayers, they have made dedications in the past so that in the future, whoever, let's say, uses their name will derive a specific benefit. And the Buddha has actually given us the practices and the names of those bodhisattvas or the mantras and dharanis in the sutras. Therefore, we can recite these mantras. We can do those practices, and by doing this, we are building up our accumulation of merit. So if you create the causes, then the good results will come from this. So it's very important to interpret all those practices and the reason and the way that we relied on the practices through an understanding of the law of cause and effect. The important thing in terms of the power of the white seed is to understand that it refers to building up accumulation and purifying negativity. And this is something that is determined by the motivation. With the right motivation, any activity can become an activity of accumulation or an activity of purification, right? So, for example, we had all those verses here in the Wheel of Sharp Weapons that was saying that when something bad happens to us, instead of getting angry at somebody else, we should recognize that this is bad karma, the result of bad karma that we have created in the past. If you have that recognition, then you say, all right, with this bad experience now, this previous negativity is purified, is removed, is purified. It has come into maturation, so it's now finished. So with this attitude, it becomes an experience of purification. So another example, Rinpoche was saying, here I am sitting in the throne here, and I'm giving you teachings. Giving you teachings and you receiving the teachings does not automatically become an activity of accumulating merit or purifying negativity. If I do it with the right motivation, yes, it becomes both. But if I don't have the right motivation, not only it's not a virtuous activity, there's even the danger of accumulating great negativity. What am I doing here sitting on the throne? Why am I talking to you? Am I expecting to get some salary, some payment, or something like this? It can become a very negative activity. The same thing for you. If you're not listening with the right motivation, if you're not attending with the right motivation, this does not become a virtuous activity. It's not accumulation and purification automatically. So as we say, it's very important. It all relies on the motivation. So we come to number 4, which is the power of repudiation. So repudiation here it means that you blame, or that you oppose. So usually we say that we oppose the enemy. And here we have explained that in this context, there is no external enemy. The one that we recognize as our enemy is the self-cherishing and various afflictions. Afflictions such as our jealousy, our pride, our competitiveness, our anger. Afflictions have this function of upsetting the mind. So they are the enemy that we must oppose. Previously, we gave the example of walking out in the street and someone is saying something very insulting to you. And we say that although the words reach your ears, you have a choice. If you don't dwell, if you don't keep thinking about these words, it means you will not become angry. But if you choose to keep thinking about it again and again, this will definitely lead you into anger. So remember what we say, the other verse, at all times examine your mind. So it is very appropriate to do this. Okay. All right, we are coming to the last one, which is the power of prayer. And here the prayer that we do is so that if we have not generated the mind of bodhicitta, that it will be newly generated. Or if some bodhicitta has been generated, we dedicate so that it will increase. So we all know, usually in our dedication prayers, at the end, we do this dedication, and we say, may the precious body mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. So that is an excellent prayer at the very end. So as we say, whether you look at the 4 powers in the duration of a day or during the duration of your entire life, it's exactly the same thing. So in the course of the day, the first thing that we do is that we establish the power of motivation, where it is really our we set the motivation and we say, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. And then this is followed by number 2, 3, and 4, which is the power of familiarity, the power of the white seed, and the power of repudiation. So really, we have to develop familiarity with all the good, all the good things, and disassociate ourselves with bad habits that we have. And if we can develop associations and good habits with virtue, then naturally the mind of bodhicitta will be developed. Now, as we try to do this, we will need the support of number 3, which is the power of the white seed, which is building up our accumulation and purifying negativity. And as we do this, we also need to oppose any negative states of self-cherishing, afflictions, and so forth. So this will be the power of repudiation. Right? And then at the very end, we will do the dedication. So as we say at the end, when we do the prayer, it is important that we're not just like a parrot repeating the words. The prayer must have with feeling. You must be touched by this prayer. So remember here that ultimately, what we want to do is to develop the mind of bodhicitta. Obviously, this is our highest goal and our highest, the highest aspiration that we have, isn't it? But to reach that, we have to start from something. And you have to understand that every good action counts. So let's say today you have one good thought about one person. So this is like one step closer to your goal. It's like starting to walk up the stairs, isn't it? Today you have one good thought about one person. Tomorrow you will have good thoughts about 2 people, about 3 people. You will have more than one good thoughts, and so on and so forth. So this virtue and goodness will increase. You will find the power to resist anger, to oppose anger, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, it's very important to cultivate a good physical and verbal expression when you interact with others. The way that we look, the way that our physical expression, physical behavior, the way that we express ourselves physically really affect other people. And even more so, the way that we verbally express ourselves. If there is a person with whom you have a problem, if you do not make the effort to at least maintain a neutral expression when you see them and maintain virtuous or neutral speech when you interact with them, what will happen is that the situation will escalate. So you will look at them with an angry look. They will look back at you with an angry look. You will say something nasty to them. They will also say something nasty to you. And when you meet them tomorrow, it will be even worse than that. So the situation will only get worse. So it's very important that we maintain, we rein back our expression of physical, facial expression, the way that we interact physically and verbally with others. All right, so as we say, the practice or the usage of the 5 powers is the same in the duration of a day and the same in the duration of a life. All right, so very important at the end to have a prayer. And as we say, the prayer has to come with feeling. The prayer here expresses our wish for something which is wholesome and something which is positive. So it should have some feeling with this. And Rinpoche was saying that I presented the 5 strengths here because you study the Lamrim, you do the lojong, and also you engage in a lot of virtuous activities every day. So to give you an example, there are many things that we do in the course of a day that help other people in the course of our worldly, ordinary job, or in occasions that we meet others, interact others. Even more when we come to the Dharma Center, we do things like offerings, prostrations, we go for refuge, we do pujas, or we work for the center. So all of this, if you can apply the 5 powers to all of these activities, then it can become a very powerful part of your everyday practice. Okay, so we will stop the presentation today, but we have come a little bit late. We're stretching towards the end of the session, but we have time for 1 or 2 questions. If you have, please ask a question.
Thank you, Rinpoche. Thank you, Rinpoche. Thank you, Vola. I have a question, which is how do we relating to setting the motivation? Because every day we are inundated with very mundane tasks, very, very mundane. Even sometimes so mundane, it's just like it has to be done, like household chores, laundry, stuff like that. So my question is, how do we transform these mundane tasks into enlightened activities? We have explained already how we can through the 5 powers, but my question is more so that to make it into like something really boring task, it's some stupid laundry that needs to be done. So
Sure.
you want to make it something really good, like
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, super clean is not good enough. Like, is it good enough to like make it so wonderful that you can offer it?
Mm-hmm.
Like and make it like a enlightened activity that you'll be happy doing it.
Okay.
Super happy doing it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so Rinpoche was saying, yes, I know what you mean. And actually, there's quite a lot of advice in various texts about different, it's almost like affirmations or visualizations that you have to transform ordinary activities. So, for example, when you go through a door, you're supposed to have this idea that I'm exiting samsara and I'm leading all sentient beings out of samsara and into the ground of Buddhahood. But Rinpoche was saying, even for us, the ordained, is so difficult to remember all those things and apply all those things. So I don't have the expectation that, the average person out there in society who is not even ordained will be going through all these affirmations and visualizations. But I can give you an example here. When we take the food, there is a particular verse that we recite that says, I take this food as a medicine. All right. It's not a verse that is blessing the food, all right, to offer the food. It is a verse that is there to remind you of certain things. So it says, I take this food as a medicine. So what is the case of the medicine? Why do we take the medicine? Medicine is something that we have to take at the right amount, not too much, not too little. We have to take it at the right time. And why is it that we take medicine? Have you ever heard of anyone saying, I'm taking this medicine because it tastes so good? No, said no one ever, right? I take this medicine because it's beneficial for my body, it's beneficial for my health. Therefore, I remind myself that as I take this food is like a medicine. It means it can support my body, it can give me energy and vitality and health and strength so that I can remain and I can be of benefit to other people. I can work in society and I can continue with my Dharma practice. Therefore, I take the food as a medicine. All right. So you, in a similar way, this is, just look at this as an example. You can look at ordinary tasks such as cleaning the house and cleaning the clothes as something that can be beneficial. So think, if I didn't clean my clothes, if I went out with dirty and smelly clothes, how would that make other people think and feel when they see me? First of all, they would think that it is disrespectful. I'm showing disrespect towards them. And it will be smelly and unpleasant and not nice to look at. Therefore, not to upset the mind of other people, I will make sure that my house is clean, my clothes are clean. When I go out, I'm clean and presentable. All right. So there are different ways you can think about it. It's like I do it because I do not want to upset or offend other people, but I also do it because obviously if I live in a clean environment, if I'm wearing clean clothes, it is something that is quite beneficial for my own health, isn't it? And I want to maintain my health in any way possible because I want to have a long life. I want to have good health so that I can continue to work and contribute and benefit and continue with my Dharma practice, isn't it? So, as we say, motivation can transform an activity, and it's very important. But remember that this does not apply to negative, non-virtuous activities. So, Rinpoche was saying, I'll give you an example. Let's say someone is producing weapons of mass destruction, right? And they say, yes, I'm producing weapons of mass destruction, but I'm doing it with the right motivation, with a good motivation. And this is going to transform the whole activity. So it doesn't work like this, okay? So remember, it is very important to use. If you have an ordinary, mundane activity, you can try to transform it, bring it into your Dharma practice with the right motivation. Remind yourself of certain things, such as this example. No. Okay, so Rinpoche is saying, I'm sorry, we're getting a little bit over time, but that last question was like so beneficial and it is so helpful for many people, I think. So it is, I want to say, it's like we talk a lot about the motivation for every activity, but actually who can manage this? Who can actually set the right motivation for each single activity? Rinpoche was saying, I'm ordained. and I cannot master this. So how can we expect, lay people, or, and people who are not ordained, to do this, to set the motivation? So Rinpoche says, to summarize, there is this that we can do. Early in the morning, set a very strong motivation, because if you say, this is my motivation for today, this is going to cover all the activities of the day. So it's very important at the beginning of the day to set up a very strong motivation. So that is one occasion, set the motivation correct. The second one is that, again, remember to set the motivation at important activities. So let's say you engage in an activity that will help others, or for example, you come into the center to attend teachings, or you come into the center to attend a puja, or to do a practice. All right. So this is a specific opportunity for an activity that can become a virtuous activity. So at the beginning of this activity, make sure that you set the motivation. All right. So you have this great opportunity. You're affiliated with the Dharma Center here. So you have many opportunities for these activities. The third thing to mention here is that you should not entertain the thought that says, what chance do I have, or what hope is there for me to do all these practices, right? We said that the area of study and the area of practice in Buddhism is vast, but this should not intimidate you. Instead, you should think, I will do as much as I can. Right? According to my ability, I will do the best that I can. And the thing is that you have excellent opportunity because you are associated with this center. And this is not just a center. You have to understand that the center is affiliated with a very big monastery. And therefore, there is this connection and this opportunity of great lamas, great geshes, who come and give teachings, right? So you have this special opportunity here, this special connection. As we say, the most important thing in our efforts is to stir the mind towards virtue, towards a good direction. And we mentioned how we can use the 5 powers to help us. But don't think that just because you heard about the 5 powers or mind training, don't think that you can get rid of all the bad habits altogether. Just like, the old clothes. My clothes are dirty and old, and I'm just going to take off these old clothes and put something new. It just change doesn't happen so easily. Change doesn't happen automatically. All right. So you say, now that I heard about those things, I'm aware of those things. So at least I will make some effort to reduce my negativity. I will make some effort to restrain myself from engaging from the worst of the afflictions, right? So some effort towards reducing. It's otherwise unrealistic to think you're going to change everything overnight. Okay. So we stop here tonight, and Rinpoche finished by thanking me and acknowledging the translator who has been associated with the center for a long time. And Rinpoche said, although I don't speak English, I get the impression by looking at people and the way that people are reacting that the meaning of what I was saying was accurately communicated. And so Rinpoche was quite supportive and understanding. And the fact, I'm sorry I had to cancel last week, but I made the effort to return this week. So Rinpoche was acknowledging my effort to continue translating. We stop here.